Good afternoon to you and your listeners, and thank you for having us.
Now, Ali, how did Nathi Mthethwa's support for the Palestinian cause during his ministerial tenure align with the broader South African foreign policy traditions rooted in anti-apartheid solidarity? And what specific diplomatic impacts did his decisions on boycotts have on on the Israeli-South Africa relations?
Um, with regards to politicians, politicians are synonymous with rhetoric, saying things for the sake of saying them, and for saying things for the sake of political expediency or gaining social capital or political capital, and all those things. Former Minister Nathi Mthethwa was none of that. We remember how, as you just mentioned, in the South Africa case, the civil society said to him, "We have an issue. Miss South Africa is going to Israel to represent South Africa in Miss Universe. This is wrong." He said, "Bamba Konalapo, what is he doing? We don't want that. We don't appreciate it. We distance ourselves as government, as civil society. We support you in your protest against the institution. They don't represent us. They don't represent the South African flag or the South African people." So he was very action oriented in his words as it comes to the boycott campaign of Israel. So that's who he was. And now, as a diplomat and also an ambassador to France, he was holding seminars in France on the effectiveness of solidarity with Palestine during this particular genocide. So many things he was, Nathi Mthethwa, but a liar or someone who uses loose rhetoric. He was not. He was not one of those.
Now, beyond policy decisions, what personal anecdotes or lesser known contributions from Mthethwa's life illustrate his commitment to global justice movements? You've just touched on, the seminars he would hold in France at different stages. But, when it comes to South Africa's struggles with, or particularly in connecting South Africa's struggles with Palestine's, just talk to us about the man that you knew and that you collaborated with and worked with.
One of the amazing things about former Minister Nathi Mthethwa was his ability to remain an activist even though he was a senior member of the cabinet. He was very accessible, surprisingly. So I was having a discussion with some other activists reminiscing about the life of Nati, and he was saying you could send him a WhatsApp message and he would not respond after 5 days. He would respond then. But not because he liked you or because you're fantastic, you're popular, whatever. No, but because you were from the Palestine Solidarity movement and he knew when you were accessing him, you were going to ask for one or highlight one or two things as regards to Palestine. So that's the point. That's the person he was, and that's the highlight I think many of us in the solidarity movement share. But also, he was a special kind of someone who understood South African foreign policy from an activist perspective. Former Minister Nathi Mthethwa would speak on the issue of Western Sahara quite diligently. The oppression of the West Sahrawi people by Morocco, on the issue of Cuba and the economic embargo. So he was an all-round international solidarity activist. He had a huge grasp on international foreign policy, and he was all around a great activist in our view.
And what strategies is Africa for Palestine considering in honoring the late Nathi Mthethwa and his legacy for by intensifying advocacy for Palestinian self-determination, and how can other African nations be engaged more deeply in these efforts?
Firstly, your last sentiment is quite insightful. That African leaders and African continents must really learn from Nathi Mthethwa. Another example is we had a team from a rugby team from Israel that wanted to come and have a friendly game with the Springboks. But the way Israelis moved, they moved covertly. They were doing it behind back doors, and we got light of it. And then we alerted the ministry. The ministry, Israel is trying to do this. There and then Nathi said, never, never, that thing's going to stop. He quickly had a meeting with South African Rugby Union, and that thing was squashed. He said, never, we are not going to have any normal sporting relationship with an abnormal regime like Israel. So African leaders, when they look at the life of Nathi Mthethwa, as it speaks to solidarity and activism, he was man of action. He walked the talk. He did not stand on podiums and say free Palestine, but the next day he was at the gala dinner with the South African Jewish Board of Deputies, like we see with other political leaders. He was a man of his word, and we think that African leaders can learn that from him, and on his legacy. And I think his life and his activism is not in isolation. He's part of a long list of people who have left this current world, but whose activism for Palestine speaks volume. People like
Yeah.
Nelson Mandela, people like Fini Jinyala, people like Dennis Goldberg. Those people have passed on, but we continue from where they left off. We are going to continue where Nathi Mthethwa left off.
Yeah.
We're not going to forget his legacy, and by celebrating him, we're going to intensify our efforts of solidarity with Palestine.
Alie, always a pleasure. Thank you for joining us on Africa Update.
Thank you for having us.
That's Alie Komape, Communications and Campaigns Manager for Africa for Palestine, ending that discussion. It is 12:31 and our news headlines up next with Onel Nzinzi.